Welcome to the Ground and Pwn Podcast, a weekly show for fans of combat sports, gaming, entertainment, and plenty more. I'm Brian Shea, online content director at Game Informer, joined by Scott Fontana, the New York Post's MMA reporter. Scott, we've got some stuff to talk about today. Obviously, we're coming off UFC 282, but we also have a ton of gaming news thanks to the Game Awards. And before we start all of that stuff, I think we're going to start on the gaming side today, but I think since you have a judging podcast, we all need to know one thing. How did you score the biggest clash of the weekend, which was Paddy Pimblett versus Ariel Helwani?
Well, see, that was during the week, sir. That started all the judging controversy, but let's face it, Ariel Helwani 10-7.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. It was pretty one-sided. You know, Paddy came out early in round one, but then Ariel just it was complete shutdown domination, maybe bordering on a stoppage.
I mean, it was Ariel catching a stray there, and all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, we're fighting? Oh, okay." That was pretty much how that went. But dude, we have way too much to talk about to go into the silliness of that whole thing. That's old news now.
Yes.
Let's get into this Game Awards stuff, dude. There was way too much.
There was so much. I don't even know where we should start, but I guess we could start with the Game of the Year winner, which was Elden Ring.
As you thought, as you suspected it was going to be that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that it was pretty obvious, but there have been upsets in the past. Like last year, It Takes Two took home the award, which,
Sure.
that's a very good game, but I don't know if many people expected it to take home the award.
It felt like a more open year last year, though.
For sure. Whereas Elden Ring, it was such a no-brainer choice for so many people that I think that it would have been weird if it didn't win. But I think that my handicapping of it last week was accurate. Where, what did I say? 90% it was going to be Elden Ring.
Yeah,
7% God of War, and maybe 3% Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which I still think maybe that was a little less than it was for Elden Ring. I think it may have been 97% that they won in hindsight.
But I mean, listen, I'm watching the awards, and you hear, oh, God of War wins this, God of War wins that, and it starts to build that momentum, and you're like, okay, at least maybe there's something here, right? It's kind of. But we've seen. I don't know how much you watch the Oscars, or if any of our listeners watch the Oscars, but sometimes that'll happen. There's a movie that's going to win all of these other awards, but then once it gets down to those final awards, like director and picture, it ends up going to this other film. And I think that was what we saw here, because we saw God of War take home basically everything it was nominated for until it got, what was it, Best Game Direction?
Yeah.
Yeah, that went to Elden Ring. And that seemed like, okay, it's probably going to be Elden Ring wins the big one too.
Those do typically go hand in hand, I found, but at the same time, it doesn't have to. I don't think...
Sure. It's, again, same thing in film.
I don't think It Takes Two won last year. I'm just bringing it up right here. Starts
sure. But again, I think that speaks to the fact that last year was a much more open field, whereas this year, if it was a 2-horse race, it wasn't a very close one.
Do you want to guess what won Best Game Direction last year?
Oh, goodness.
It's a game you've played.
It's a game I played? Oh, goodness. Let's say, I'm going to say Deathloop.
Correct.
See, I thought the game was fantastic. I still haven't played It Takes Two. I got to get on that.
Yeah. So we've been talking about it since the start of this podcast, and it's just I haven't had any free gaming time lately, and you've been pretty busy on your side as well. But there's a lot of stuff. Like, people tune into the Game Awards for the awards, obviously. But I think the main reason people tune in is for the announcements. And
Sure.
We got so many of them. So do you want to start with release dates or reveals?
Let's go to the release dates, because I like that it starts to give me a picture of what we're going to look forward to next year.
Yeah, and May into June is just going to be insanity. It turns out.
June in particular.
Yeah, I mean, but I'll once I tell you the ones that have been revealed, I'm going to give you kind of the rundown of what our spring is looking like, because I have a spreadsheet here. But here's the new dates that we got, okay? So, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is the sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, March 17th.
St. Paddy's Day. That leaked out kind of a couple days ahead, though.
Yeah, it was, but we got it finalized and official and everything
Sure.
at the Game Awards. We got a good trailer. That trailer looked so badass. I am all in on this game. I liked the first one. By the way, this game's done by Respawn, which is the company that did Titanfall, and they do Apex Legends. So they know how to make a good game. And Jedi's Fallen Order, I think, was a very good foundation for what could be an incredible Star Wars series.
Sure.
Like, I think there were some problems. I think like the combat was very good, but the map design was just kind of confusing and frustrating. And then they used the same like traversal mechanics way too often. Like, all right, how many slides did this guy go down during the course of his adventure? Because I felt like you went down multiple slides, and it was just a way to be like, all right, you can't come back this way once you go down this slide. And it's like, well, they've never seen me on a playground because I can go back up any slide. That is one thing that I
ladders. What's your deal?
It really was like Star Wars Jedi shoots and ladders. More like Star Wars Jedi falling down this slide. I don't know. We'll move on.
Boo.
Street Fighter 6, a game that I am very excited for. I think you're pretty excited for it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Street Fighter would be like that's my fighting game franchise.
Yeah. June 2nd, man.
I like it. That's just in time for my birthday. I'm June 11th.
We're about 6 months away, 6.5 months away. Mm-hmm. And I'm also going to be playing that game, I believe, this weekend because there's a beta that I've been invited to that I'm going to get to play some new stuff.
We also got that party.
I can send you a registration link. I don't know if they'll let you in, but I can send you a registration link.
Yeah, why not?
And then they also revealed, or they showed off 3 characters that they'd previously announced, but they showed off DJ from Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
That was cool to see him, yeah.
It's cool that he's like actually a DJ now, apparently.
Yeah, why not?
And then 2 other characters, Manon and I forget the guy's name. But yeah, we got looks at new characters. You can seek that out if you want. Then we got Diablo 4, which is coming out 4 days later. June 6th is Diablo 4.
Are you a big Diablo guy? Because I'm not.
Not really. Like, I played 3 a little bit, like a few hours, and I was like, okay, I need like a group to do this. I'll have to find a group to do it. And then being an adult and syncing up with like 1 to 3 other people is just nearly impossible, I found.
It's basically impossible at this point, yeah. It doesn't happen anymore. I'm just waiting for when my children get old enough, that's when I can play co-op games again.
Yes. Actually, I think I may have even forgotten one on this list. Because we'll save that one for last.
Oh, okay, all right. Mystery game.
Because it links into something else that we want to talk about.
Okay.
And then one that I am excited for.
Segue.
Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah.
Are you into this?
I see. Listen, I like Final Fantasy games, but I don't think I've actually played through a Final Fantasy game since Final Fantasy 12.
And that's one that I have not played through, honestly.
But I own Final Fantasy 13. Final Fantasy 12 is fantastic, by the way. I can't recommend enough Zodiac Age if you just kind of go get that one, because that's what you play on the current consoles. But like, when are you going to play it? I don't really know.
The problem is that like when I was a kid, my first Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy X, and
Okay.
I remember I went to a friend's house, and we went sled riding because he had this huge hill, and we came in one time and he had Final Fantasy X on his PlayStation. And I was like, oh, what's this? This looks really cool. And he played it for like, I watched him play for like maybe 45 minutes, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm getting Final Fantasy X. Like that was like, I'm literally going tomorrow to get this game because I thought it was so awesome. And I played it, and it was like, it's one of my it's my 3rd favorite game of all time. If we want to like get down to like the rankings and everything at this point, like I've played it probably 8 or 9 times at this point, like all the way through.
Wow,
and
that is a lot.
So when I was a kid, like I loved it. I played it all the time. And then I was like, oh, well, there's a new one out, Final Fantasy 12. Like I knew Final Fantasy 11 was like an online game. I didn't want to play that.
I played that a little bit, actually. I did.
Yeah?
Yeah. See, it's like, really the only MMO I ever really played. So
just sight unseen, I bought Final Fantasy 12 Collector's Edition. And I was like, well, I am going to love this. Like if it's newer than what I just played, like, oh man, this is going to be great. It's like basically what I just played with new graphics. It's such a different game.
It's a very different game.
That I was just, I played like the opening hours and I was completely turned off by it and never went back.
That's too bad, because honestly, I think it's probably my favorite of the PS2 generation ones. I like it better than 10.
Wow. Well, which one did you play first?
Oh, I played 10 first, because so my buddy, one of my best buddies growing up, Adriatic, he was big into Final Fantasy from 7 on. So like he would play them and I'd come over and I'd mostly watch, or like I would be the guy on the guidebook.
Okay.
So I was like his guy in the chair. You know
yeah, the guy. I was about to say that. Yeah,
I was the guy in the chair. And I was cool with that, because I didn't necessarily, I wasn't as into playing them at that point. I kind of just liked like sitting along and like being the guy in the chair. So 7, 8, 9, 10. I watched all those. It wasn't until 12 that I like actually started playing by myself with, because he had moved at this point. He lives in Texas now. But that was when I started playing on my own. And actually, when I say on my own, I played kind of like in tandem with my buddy in college. So like I would sit there and play part of it, then he would play. But I loved it. It's kind of ahead of its time in a lot of ways. Like it really just like no one was ready for what that kind of was. And I think everybody had expectations of like they wanted a turn-based game. Probably what you got turned off by is it just wasn't the game you wanted it to be. It was something else.
I'll tell you which game I did love, because I played 12, or I started 12, and I was like, this is not what I want. Lost Odyssey on Xbox, which was the true Final Fantasy 11, I think.
I actually don't know that game at all, because I've never had an Xbox.
So after Final Fantasy 10. Hironobu Sakaguchi, who was the creator of Final Fantasy, left and founded his own studio, and he got Nobuo Uematsu, who is the composer of the Final Fantasy series, or the early Final Fantasy series, to come with him and make this game called Lost Odyssey. And it's very much in the style of Final Fantasy X, but like with Xbox 360 graphics instead of like PS2 graphics. And like the combat system is like a slightly more involved version. Like there's like a timing mechanic. When you go to hit, it'll give you like a critical hit if you time your hit just right. And also like there's like a lines system. So like there's like a front line and a back line of your party when you're in battle. So like there's a little bit more strategy involved, but like it is like a successor to Final Fantasy X through and through. And I loved that game.
I've got to ask some of my friends who love those old, JRPGs if they know this one, because I'm not sure I've ever talked about it with any of them. That's fascinating.
Yeah, you should check it out. I know you don't have an Xbox, right? Like you're thinking about getting one?
I do not, but does it exist on Game Pass?
Yes, it does. I think I know it works on Series X because I own it, but
I have to start thinking about using because we talked about this a few months ago. I was like, I don't want to do it before God of War comes out. God of War is come and gone now, and I didn't pick up any of the big games that would take like a ton of time. I'm playing Star Wars Skywalker saga, but like I'm at this point I'm kind of just like playing it here and there. It's not like a game that's demanding my time.
Yeah. It does not appear as though it is on Game Pass, even though it is an Xbox 360 exclusive.
That is unfortunate.
But yeah, that's a very good game. That is my recommendation of the week. A new segment we have never done before and may never do again. But that's my recommendation of the week. Is Lost
There you
Odyssey.
go. I like that.
So
a potentially recurring, but maybe not segment.
Yes, I've had a couple of those on All Things Nintendo. So
it's great.
Here's one.
Throw spaghetti against the wall. Maybe it sticks.
Exactly. Mom's spaghetti. We have another one that I did not put on this list, but I put on our reveals
surprise
list.
Segue game. I like it.
Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League.
Oh, yes, of course. We were talking about this.
We got a release date, and this is where May kind of comes into the equation of how crazy spring is going to be, because that got a May 26th release date, but also we got a pretty touching reveal, I think, of... we talked a couple weeks ago about the passing of Kevin Conroy, and I think it affected both of us, but I think it affected you a little bit more, Scott. You were raised on the Batman animated series a little bit more than I was. Yeah. However, like I loved his work. I loved the Batman animated series. I just didn't watch it as much as you, but like his work on the Arkham games is unparalleled.
No, of course. And, I don't appreciate him better than you. Thus, he means more to me.
He was a bigger part of your childhood. He was a bigger part of your childhood. But them revealing that, because the whole premise of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, it's right there in the name. You're playing as the Suicide Squad. The world has been taken over by Brainiac, and you are trying to basically take down the Justice League, which by all indications might be under control of Brainiac. So like Superman, the Flash.
A plus B looks like C, yeah.
So we've seen like them confronting the Flash. We've seen them confronting Superman. And this is the first time that they showed off a confrontation with Batman. And he's voiced by Kevin Conroy. He delivers the line to perfection. And in the feels. Right in the feels, man. Like, that was rough. But I'm glad that we got a release date, because Rocksteady, this is their first game since Arkham Knight. They did not do Gotham Knights. They didn't do Arkham Origins, which came out before, but still, they're the only ones of the core trilogy. They didn't do Arkham Origins. They didn't do Gotham Knights. They did Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Knight, and now they're doing Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And I'm happy that they got to work with Kevin Conroy one last time, because I think that like they kind of, I know he was doing a lot of like animation work with DC still to that day, but they also kind of like helped push Kevin Conroy back into like the mainstream, I think, with those Arkham games. And it's nice that they were able to kind of work with him one last time.
I'm very excited to get one more chance, and I'm sure there will be some touching tributes within the game itself. I can only imagine there will be some sort of thing there, and that'll just be a lovely send off for who all accounts. And I'm just so sad that I never got the chance to meet him, because he sounds like he was just a lovely man.
Yeah, that's it. It's a bummer. It's a total bummer that like I didn't get to meet him either. Which, you know, I've met a lot of voice actors, but never Kevin Conroy, unfortunately. But
I have met Rob Paulson.
Yes, yeah, Raphael, right?
Yes, he does so much, but yes, he's Raphael of our childhood.
Yes,
he's Yakko and all these things.
Oh my god, I forgot he's
Pinky.
Yakko. Oh, yeah. So here, I promised that we'd run down kind of the March or the spring release date here, which is just wild. So March 3rd, Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which looks really cool. Actually, check that out. Skull and Bones, Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. Skull and Bones, yeah, maybe. We'll skip some of these. Star Wars Jedi Survivor,
Sure.
March 17th. Resident Evil 4 Remake, March 24th. Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores, which was also announced at the Game Awards.
The DLC,
it's an expansion. April 19th. Dead Island 2, April 28th. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, May 12th. Suicide Squad.
That game?
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, it must have been some indie game that I accidentally said. May 26th, Suicide Squad Killed Justice League, and then the trio of June releases that we saw, which were Street Fighter 6, Diablo 4, and Final Fantasy 16. So I hope you get a little break in January if you try to keep up with all the newest releases like I do, because we're going to be drowning or feasting, depending on your look at it, depending on how your perspective goes there.
Brian's going to be at a buffet.
I'll be at a buffet /
like I was gorging on all the food at the wedding I was at on over the weekend.
But I feel like I'll be gorging in the way that the guy from the movie Seven gorged. You remember that movie?
Be forced down your throat.
Yeah, it's gonna be forced down my throat, and I will be tied to the chair.
You'll be left a dead, disgusting mess at the end. Oof.
Yeah, that's basically the way I will feel at the end of this stretch.
If you want to feel good about your gaming habits, listen to the Ground and Pone podcast.
So, Scott, we have some other reveals to talk about from the Game Awards and from Software. Big night for them.
First off, even before we get to that, what we have to point out is I missed on my prediction, my bold prediction for what would happen. There was no 007. Didn't happen. What was yours again? I can't recall.
I don't recall either. It's not important.
Accountability is key, my friend.
I think I may have said that Sports Story was going to get a surprise launch, and
okay.
If I said that, then that was also wrong.
That's right. But yeah, so From Software
revealed Armored Core 6: Fires of Rubicon, which is going to, it's revitalizing an old franchise. But
I'm not as familiar. I've heard of it, but I'm not as familiar with it.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it either. I'm going to see if there's anything that, okay. No, not at all. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it is listed as coming soon, and I'm bringing up the Steam page.
Let me ask you this too, because obviously I see here you've made a lovely list for us, and we're going to talk about these games, but is there like a favorite of the reveals that you had?
I mean, we talked about Kevin Conroy and Suicide Squad.
Sure.
Well, I know one that you are excited for, which is Death Stranding 2.
I'm actually honestly not that excited for it.
All right, well then never mind.
The funny thing. There's one I am quite excited for. It's not that it. See, obviously we talked about Death Stranding when I was playing it, and I think I enjoyed my time with it overall. But I also like kind of left it like, you know what, I could be good never revisiting this. You know what I mean? And that's why I kind of looked at this game and I'm like, oh, it looks interesting. I'm sure it's going to be a well-made game. It's going to be very Kojima, just as Death Stranding was. But I'm like, I think I would need to kind of read reviews, and even it doesn't matter whether it's a good game or a bad game. I just kind of need to know what I'm walking myself into, because it was a lot, and it was kind of a vibe I wasn't totally in love with. So I don't know. It's very weird. It's a weird experience, this game.
Yeah, it made me want to go play Death Stranding 1 because I never got like super far into it. I was just like, okay, this is like very much.
I feel like you should experience it. Yeah,
I feel like I should. I really should. It's just I think it came out around a time where other games were coming out. That's the story of my life. It's like, oh, I want to play that game, but there's also other games.
Mm-hmm.
But Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty, getting another A-list actor under its belt. So we already had Keanu Reeves as one of the main characters of that game. Now we have an expansion coming this year, or I guess next year, starring Idris Elba, which he's everywhere these days. He's Knuckles.
He does everything.
He really does everything. And I honestly wouldn't mind him being Bond. I think he would knock it out of the park.
Okay, here you've hit a chord with me. I have strong opinions on Idris Elba being Bond, right?
Oh, boy.
I would say if Idris Elba was put forth as the man to play Bond 10 years ago,
sure,
I would have been like all in, love it. Stringer Bell, that's my dude. And now he's in way too many things. And James Bonds, they don't typically get guys that have been in everything. They want you to be known more as James Bond.
That's fair.
I think that's a lot of it at this point because again, Idris Elba is in literally everything now. He's too everywhere. And not only that, he's getting much older. You know, for them to hire a first-time Bond at his age, I believe he's 50.
I mean, he could play an older Bond the same way Daniel Craig played a younger, inexperienced Bond.
I don't want that. I don't. It's not. Why would the British government have a really old James Bond?
I don't know. Why would they have a really old Queen? There's no logic with those people.
Because they don't have a choice. She just kept getting older and didn't die. That's how it works, sir. But no, do you know what I'm saying? Like I kind of want them to go in a younger direction. I'm going to give you two names that I think would be interesting as James Bond.
Is it Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone?
It is both of those. How did you know?
Because we talked about this already, remember?
That's wild. No, it's not that.
Remember we were talking about Broforce. That was our hypothetical there.
That's true, yeah. No. My two choices as James Bond, and I'm open to plenty more, but like the two that I've kind of been saying for a few years now are Richard Madden, who, if you recall, is Robb Stark from Game of Thrones.
Okay, yeah, he was also Icarus in the Eternals, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's in a ton of things, but that is one of his roles, yeah. And I'm very biased because not only is he Scottish, and my grandmother is Scottish, but he comes from the next town over from where my grandmother came from.
Okay.
So I'm very biased in that sense. But I think he'd knock it out. I think he'd be a very good James Bond. Number 2, Daniel Kaluuya.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think he'd be an interesting choice from Get Out and many other films as well. I think he'd be a fascinating choice as well. Yeah.
I mean, I like both of those choices. I didn't think of what's his name? Richie Madden?
Richard Madden.
Yeah. From the Madden NFL series.
Yes, of course. His grandfather is obviously John Madden.
Yes. Famous Scottish person.
Aye, laddie.
Boom, laddie.
But yeah, so those are the guys that I kind of keep telling people that I would like to see as James. I want them to go younger. I don't want them to go for I don't think Tom Holland is the right choice. He's not only is he a little too young, but again, he's now known for so many other things. I
would rather have Henry Cavill before Tom Holland. You know, Tom Holland, he's my best friend.
If you're telling me those are my two finalists, then yeah, I'd pick Henry Cavill.
I think Henry Cavill.
Is it Cavill or Cavill? I thought it was Cavill.
It's
but he's also known for a bunch of things. Now he's Superman. He's Geralt.
Well, not anymore. Not Geralt anymore. And probably not Superman anymore.
He may not be Superman anymore. Yeah, heck knows.
Anyway. Yeah, so I had a tweet about the pronunciation of Henry Cavill. I was like, every time I pronounce it a different way.
It's like Qatar or Qatar.
Yes. But I was going to do a follow-up joke of, is it Henry? Is it Henri? Is it? And somebody beat me to it, and I was so angry because I was going to do it like
Henry. That's the funny thing. It's Henry.
Okay. We have some more here.
Circle back here. But more reveals. We haven't even hit the one that I'm most excited for.
Is it Judas?
It is Judas. There you go.
So aside from being a famous traitor, it's also the new game from Ghost Story Games. And if you don't know the name of that studio, that's because they've never put out a video game before.
They've never made a game.
However, it was founded, I believe, in 2015 by Ken Levine, who is the creator. Well, I think he dissolved Irrational Games in 2014 and then founded this maybe later that year or early 2015.
It's a long time ago. Basically, my son's entire life, my oldest son.
Yeah, my entire career at Game Informer basically has been this studio's existence without putting out a game. But Ghost Story Games is that studio, and they finally announced their new game, Judas. And again, it's Ken Levine, the creator of BioShock, and it looks really interesting.
All you have to do is watch like 10 seconds of this without audio, without any text overlay, and you'll think to yourself, well, this reminds me of BioShock.
Yes, it does. It very much
really
does.
Immediately feels like that. But obviously it's its own thing. I don't think they can make it a continuation, right? They probably don't own the IP.
No, I would imagine 2K Games owns the IP of that. But yeah, so that is one that I think people are really excited for. Who knows if or when we'll ever see it, though, because I
mean, yes, obviously there's you just never know. But that was the one that when it was over, that was where I was like, I got to Google this. I don't even know anything about this. And then obviously it was a total reveal. It was a world reveal. So that's why it was nothing. But yeah,
I mean, he got so many massive reveals from some of the biggest creators of the entire industry. I mean, From Software, obviously coming off Elden Ring. They've done Bloodborne. They've done this Dark Souls series. Getting their new game is a huge get. Obviously, he's really good friends with Kojima. This is Jeff Keighley we're talking about. He's really great friends with Hideo Kojima. So if Kojima's going to announce Death Stranding 2 or whatever his other new game is, he probably is going to do something that Jeff Keighley does, whether it's Summer Game Fest or the Game Awards.
I guess if I had thought about it, I might have said Death Stranding 2 as a reveal. That would have been my prediction.
That would have been a good one, yeah.
But I didn't actually know that backstory. You're much more clued in than I am.
They're very, very good friends. And then, we
got the new fishing together.
I don't think they go fishing together, but there's many pictures of them palling around. And also, speaking of palling around, after the Game Awards, we got a picture of Hideo Kojima and Al Pacino, who was a presenter at the Game Awards, hanging out, eating a meal, it looked like.
I saw that, and then a few days before, I want to say it was Kojima and Jordan Peele.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
I saw them hanging out.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That would be...
Get out of here with that.
Speaking of big names in the film industry, crime boss Roque City, which I did not expect this. Like,
I actually missed this reveal entirely. I don't even know what this is.
It looks like kind of like a almost like if somebody remade GTA Vice City, but with like a star-studded cast. So it has Mark Madsen, Danny Trejo, Michael Rooker, Danny Glover, Kim Basinger, and Chuck Norris on the cast.
Basinger, sir.
I don't know, man. And
you know why I know? Because I watched the Simpsons episode recently, and that was part of the joke in there.
And Damien Poitier is also on the cast, and I believe he's also a writer.
Okay.
So I think his biggest Hollywood role to this point was he played Thanos at the post-credit scene of Avengers 1 before they recast him as Josh Brolin. Okay. But he was also, I think, the lead in the video game Payday 2. He's a striking looking man. He is a very, very handsome man, if I do say so myself. But he looks like he could have been Thanos if they didn't recast him for Josh Brolin. However, that's just a...
Are we implying that Thanos is a handsome man?
I mean, hey, the shoe fits. The glove fits. The gauntlet fits. All right, we got it on the third iteration there. Okay, final one. I think this is one that nobody expected because, nobody expected Death Stranding 2 because... it seemed like Kojima was going to go in a different direction. It seemed like he was not going to make a sequel to Death Stranding.
You know what? I'll be honest. I actually kind of thought he would.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Monday morning quarterback here. I didn't make a prediction.
I thought he'd do it at this show, but for whatever reason, it felt like a universe he was happy to revisit.
Okay. Well, you were the one who finished it, not me. So maybe I
don't think that's the funny thing too. I don't know that there's that many hints that they would make a sequel. It's I don't know. It's a weird thing. Anyway, but say what you wanted to say, sir. I'm stealing your thunder.
So it came out. It was like, all right, here's the new game from Supergiant Games. Speaking of very well-respected creators getting an announcement at the Game Awards. So Supergiant Games, known for Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, and most recently, the smash hit, the biggest hit of their entire existence, Hades. They came out and they're like, all right, here's our new game. And it started playing. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Like this this looks kind of like, they're going back to Greek mythology. That's weird. Why would they do that? They just did, oh, it's Hades 2. So they made Hades 2, or they announced Hades 2. It's going to be early access, I think, in 2023 on PC. And then, they didn't announce it officially, but I'm assuming every other console on the planet after that.
Stands to reason it did get to the other consoles as well. I don't think they would close off.
It would be
their
very
ability
silly
to make money off a sequel.
Yeah, but that is one that I think a lot of people were very surprised by, because Supergiant Games has never done a sequel. They've done spiritual successors to their own stuff before, but they've never done a straight up sequel. So that just speaks to how much that was a success for their studio.
It was massive. I have a lot of friends who I wouldn't consider to be like big gamers. They're not the ones who I would think are playing games that are like, on the pulse, so to speak, except for like maybe like a massive big release. Yeah. That's not what Hades was, especially at the time. And they were playing it, and they're like, oh, it's a fantastic game. You got to play it. And I still haven't played it. I got to get to that.
Yeah, I need to play more of it. Like, it's another one of the very, like, I played like a few hours.
I would love to see your list of, I should play more of that.
Dude, it's just my Xbox hard drive, really, and my PlayStation's hard drive. Like, I download them, like, I should go back to this. Like, Yakuza 2. Like, I want to play Yakuza 2 so bad, because I love Zero, I love Yakuza Kiwami, and I need to play Yakuza Kiwami 2, and I love Like a Dragon. I want to get through the entire Yakuza series before the next, like, numbered entry. And I'm just like, when am I going to do this? It's not.
I would bet against you. I'm sorry.
Like, I just need to take like a month off from work and play through like all these games. Like, I might just take a sabbatical. And
I recommend taking a year off of work. That's what, I did that one time. It was called being laid off. And I'll tell you, I had a lot more time to do certain things, but also I was applying to a lot of jobs. So there was that part of it.
Yes, there is that part of it. And if I don't have this job, then I probably don't have a house. So that's another problem.
Having been paying a mortgage at the time, I can tell you it's definitely it runs rent in your headspace.
Yes. And one more thing that I want to talk about, that's all the Game Awards stuff. It was a very good show. The only place it was really lacking, I would say, was like the musical performances. Like, we had Hozier. Is that how you pronounce it? Hozier?
They said it, and I don't remember how it's pronounced.
Hozier?
It might be Hozier.
Hozier, I think it is.
I don't know.
He gave a very good performance. I don't know. It didn't, like, it was a very well done performance. It just didn't really.
It was from the God of War soundtrack.
Yeah, it was like, okay, that was cool. I was like waiting for like a big name. In the past years, they've gotten like Green Day. They had Sting.
Well, Halsey performed,
but it was like for like a minute. Like,
it wasn't very long. But she's big.
She performed like a verse.
Halsey, she was by the way, Halsey is. She grew up like 15 minutes from where I did. Like, she's much younger than me, but like, yeah.
Okay. Like, that's like, you have a lot of like point of references on this episode. I've found. That's what this episode title is. Points of reference.
It might be, unless I can come up with a better pun. We have some listeners that really love the pun names that I give these episodes, sir.
I saw that. Well, we are also going to be talking about some points in the MMA side of things, but we'll talk about that when we get to it.
That is true.
One more thing on the gaming side before we jump over, because we also have a ton of stuff to talk about on the MMA side.
We do.
But Call of Duty, allegedly coming to Nintendo. Apparently Microsoft has entered a 10-year agreement that it will bring Call of Duty to Nintendo systems once they acquire Activision Blizzard. I'm saying if they acquire Activision Blizzard, because shortly after that, the FTC filed a lawsuit against them. Which, I don't think it really has any water. Just like, it doesn't hold any water, I don't think, because
the lawsuit.
Here's a very, very, very smart move by Microsoft, by the way, the Nintendo thing, because Sony's primary claim, at least in the public eye so far, has been, they're just going to make they're going to make all the biggest franchises exclusive if they acquire Activision Blizzard. So, Microsoft's gone on such a spending spree in recent years. They acquired Bethesda. They have acquired like Ninja Theory, which is like the Hellblade developer. They've acquired all these other like studios that they've worked with in the past, like the developer that makes State of Decay, the developer that makes the Forza series. Now they're going after Activision Blizzard, which is probably maybe their second biggest acquisition. I mean, Activision Blizzard is huge, don't get me wrong, but Bethesda just has so many developers under their umbrella. Whereas Activision Blizzard, they have all the Blizzard games, so like Diablo, Overwatch, World of Warcraft, which is enormous. And then they also have Call of Duty, which is...
But Call of Duty, like, I mean, how much of the games that Activision has are, like, bigger market share is what I would wonder,
Yeah,
you know?
that's the thing.
I feel like that's where it actually becomes the bigger one.
Yeah. It might be bigger in terms of, like, sales, but in terms of, like, overall, like, studios and games and IPs, I think Bethesda might have been bigger. But...
hey, you know what pays the bills? It's not IPs.
Exactly. However, Sony's been saying like, oh, well, all these big IPs, like, are they going to make it so that Call of Duty is now exclusive to Microsoft or like, PC and Xbox? Like that's going to be anti-competitive. Microsoft has continually said like, oh, we're going to honor any exclusivity deals because like Sony has exclusivity deals with the Call of Duty franchise for the past several years of like, all right, we get content first. We get Call of Duty skins. We get all this stuff like the betas hit PlayStation first. All this stuff comes first. And Microsoft's saying, hey, we're going to continue to honor those. Like, you look at how when they acquired Bethesda, they didn't say, oh, we're going to cancel the Deathloop exclusivity for PlayStation and we're going to just put it on Xbox instead. No, they honored that. Deathloop was exclusive for a year on PlayStation. Now it's on Xbox as well. However, Microsoft came out and was like, we're committed to keeping Call of Duty on PlayStation consoles for the foreseeable future, which is a good step in the right direction. But this... striking a 10-year deal, Phil Spencer tweeted, with Nintendo to bring Call of Duty games to Nintendo consoles. That's the ultimate counterpoint to Sony's claims of like, oh, we're so concerned that it's not going to be on other systems because now Microsoft's coming out and saying, not only is it going to be on the other systems, we have a 10-year contract with Nintendo to bring it to a system that Activision wasn't even bringing it to without us, which I think that shoots down a lot of validity that PlayStation has in making these claims. And then the vice president of Microsoft quote tweeted in kind of a passive aggressive fashion that was like, we're so happy to bring this to new consoles. Anytime Sony wants to sit down with us, we're all ears, basically. Like they did kind of an MMA manager type situation or a Dana White type situation where like, hey, if you want to come to the table, we're ready to negotiate.
Did they also say he doesn't want the fight?
Oh, they did. They were like, oh, well, they don't want the games. But yeah, like this, it's kind of looking like a mess because like Microsoft's announcing partnerships with Nintendo, FTC's announcing lawsuits at Microsoft, Activision is like saying like, hey, we have confidence that Microsoft's going to win this, and Microsoft's like basically saying like, all right, we'll see you in court. Come ready, come at the king, you best not miss. Is basically what Microsoft's saying out there in the public.
A lot of Wire references in this episode. I like that too. I must say too that I feel like there was a missed opportunity in revealing this lawsuit. You pointed out that it would have been wonderful if they had done a world premiere style at the Game Awards. There's a lawsuit with the FTC.
Just imagine Jeff Keighley. We have a very important but unorthodox announcement here, and just fades to black world premiere. And then
it's just a lawyer going up there and being like, yep, this is me serving papers.
Phil Spencer walks on stage. Everybody's like, oh my God, we're getting a big Xbox announcement. And then a lawyer just comes on, hands him the lawsuit, and then walks off stage. That would have been the most hilarious thing ever. But
I mean, it would have been a little awkward.
It would have been,
but it would have been. I mean, would it have been more awkward than what Bill Clinton was a rabbi or whatever
Yeah, I had a meme that I tweeted out, and then I looked into a little bit more of like what that stuff that the kid on the stage may have meant, and I was like, I'm going to delete it. I'm not going to be party to this because there's some theories that it may have been an anti-Semitism dog whistle, and I was just like, maybe I'm just
it was whatever it was. It seemed obviously super weird and out of nowhere. But the one thing I came away from that, and we don't need to dwell on this. We can move on after this. But I just wanted to say, like,
so for people who missed it, when Elden Ring won Game of the Year, they gave their acceptance speech. The music started playing, and then like this little kid just like walked up in front and started like shouting.
Little kid, he was like a teenager.
Yeah, but like it was like a smaller human that appeared not to be an adult. Walked out onto the microphone and like just said he wanted to, well, he said nominate, but I think he meant dedicate. He's like, I want to nominate this award to Reformed Orthodox Rabbi Bill Clinton. And everybody's like, what? And then like people came on stage and like basically apprehended him and pulled him off. And then Jeff Keighley tweeted that he was arrested. And then the next day, the kid was doing all kinds of interviews, not breaking character from...
Jason Schreier interview.
Jason Schreier, a YouTuber that I've had on All Things Nintendo. he had him on his Twitter Spaces,
and Jason is not going to give someone a platform to spread anti-Semitism. So
no, and like Jason tweeted that like he asked him a question. He's like, I think he's just a Jewish prankster, is what Jason said, because he's like, he didn't break character the entire time that they talked, and Jason was like, I asked him a question in Hebrew. He understood it and then pretended not to. So like Jason's like, I don't think he was like doing anything like anti-Semitic, but also like I on the off chance that he was, I just deleted the meme because basically,
of course,
I took the it was an idea from one of the editors, Marcus Stewart at Game Informer. He was like, I want to see like the Yakuza like boss fight screen of Bill Clinton, and then have that as like his title underneath. If you ever played Yakuza, like whenever a boss comes out, it shows like it kind of flashes to like his name and then like the title of like whatever he is in the Yakuza, and so I made one of those with the Yakuza font and then tweeted it out, and it got some good engagement. And I was like, I looked into it a little bit more, and I'm like, let me just delete this just in case it was.
Keep your distance. I can understand.
I don't want to have any part of that. Yeah.
No, that's fair. The one thing I just didn't understand about this is I'm like, they were clearly done talking as a collective from Software. Turn the mic off.
Yeah. Yep.
He should have been able. What should have happened is the kid got up there and found that the mic was already off. It's not that they needed to cut it off. Like, yeah, cut it off. But also, it's done. Just turn it off.
The big problem for me, I mean, he's going to say stuff into the mic, like a teenager getting up on stage and saying stupid stuff into a mic. We've had that with grown adults, with like Kanye West getting up on stage during an award show and saying stupid shit into a mic. Yeah, he says a lot of dumb
things all the time into microphones these days.
However,
and they're also anti-Semitic. That's funny.
Yeah, the problem with this is that he got up on stage in general. Like, you don't know what that guy was going to do, right? Like, he could have done anything. Like, he could have attacked them for all we know. Like,
sure. Obviously, it's a breakdown in security, and that's a problem. But
yeah, that is the big concern for me. Like, I mean, obviously, thankfully, nothing like physical, violent happened, but like it could have been. Like, and security needs to be tighter regarding that. But like the thing is like,
feels like a lesson here.
He got out of the crowd right with them, though, so he walked up on stage with them and just stood behind them patiently until they were done talking. So it's like they probably saw him walking up on stage and just assumed he was part of the development team, which is problematic. But also, like, I'm trying to think in my head, like, all right, do you like designate people ahead of time of like, all right, these are members of a development team nominated for an award, and they have to check your badge as you go up on stage? I feel like that would just slow down the process of getting up on stage. Like, it's going to be a logistical problem for Jeff Keighley to solve, but he's solved more difficult problems in the past.
Put it this way: how does no one from Software look around and be like, "You're not one of us"?
Well, he was smart about it in that way because he stood behind them while they were presenting, and like, you know, they're focused on like, all right, we have a speech to give. There's a huge crowd in front of us. Like, they wanted to like make sure that they were focusing on their speech, and then like, there's some kid behind them, like they probably didn't even notice.
All right,
but yeah, it was more on like security, like they like, and like even when the kid got up in front of the mic, there was a developer like pointing like, who is this? Like, he was like, he leaned into somebody and like spoke to something. Like, he kind of looked like he was saying like, we don't know this guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of a weird situation, but you know, I was more inclined to focus on the positives of that night.
Oh, of course. But it was a weird way to end it. That's for sure.
It was a weird weekend in general because we got some fights that I think all around, I mean, well, I guess the Bellator stuff didn't feel super unsatisfying because, like, I think the right guy won in the main event.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
so let's start with Bellator.
Yeah. Let's start here because I don't think we're going to spend as much time on Bellator. The end result of the events of Friday night at Bellator 289 was that we do finally have a bantamweight Grand Prix final. And it's going to be Raufeon Stotts, who got his win over Danny Sabatello.
That's the one fight this week that I watched, by the way. The one fight
you win. How did you manage? Because I know you kind of been like, how am I going to watch Bellator? How did this happen for you, sir?
So I loaded up Paramount Plus, and apparently Showtime is included with my subscription. So I was like,
just
all right,
in there now. Got it.
I've got nothing going on a Friday night. I'm gonna turn this on, and I had a ton of stuff going on a Saturday night, which is why I missed the entire UFC card. I was party hopping on Saturday night.
I was at a wedding, so I actually missed it live too.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, well, let me try to. I mentioned how like the prelims might satisfy your bloodlust on the UFC 282 card. I was like, I need some bloodlust satisfaction here. So I turned on Bellator just for one fight because I saw people were tweeting about it, and I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's hit it. And it was just in time for Rafion Stotts and Danny Sabatello to start their fight.
A very anticipated fight. I mean, there was a lot of build up for this one. Anyone who watches, Aaron Hawani's shows, he had these guys on a few months back. This was honestly, it was kind of it was probably one of the most in-demand Bellator fights that they've ever done, especially one that included two fighters who are actually like in their prime as opposed to well past their prime. They've had these one-off fights before with it's like the trilogy fight between, Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie. That was way, past its due date.
Yeah.
And then we've had Kimbo Slice, may rest in peace, against Dada 5000. That was another weird fight from back then. But this was one where it was anticipated in the sense of these are guys who are good, they're coming up, and there's a lot of clearly, whether it's built in or real bad blood, right? It is what it is. If it's real, then you believe it. Obviously, if it was kind of built, then it sold it very well. I do think there's some heat there.
I also think they're both just very good at building a fight, right? Like Danny Sabatello,
they did a good job of this particular one. I don't know that the two of them are going to be able to get this formula with every fighter that they're going to face, but I think they worked really well together here.
Yeah, they're good foils for each other.
So super anticipated fight. Go in, watch it. Obviously, you checked it out. I'm glad you were able to get to it. But yeah, so everyone's kind of watching this fight, and it's like, okay. You're seeing Sabatello's trying to use his wrestling. Big John saying, you got to make sure you're not just controlling. You got to do some damage here too. So there's a couple rounds where Sabatello definitely does a good job and he gets those rounds. And then there's 3 other rounds where it's like, okay, Sabatello doesn't do a whole lot. Rafion Stotts is doing some damage. He's getting his licks in. He's going for submissions, that kind of thing. He's avoiding any sort of real effective offense from Danny Sabatello. And at the end, I think most people are thinking, okay, probably Rafion Stotts is going to get the win here. You never know when it comes to judging because most people just don't understand how fights are judged. That's number one. But we get in there and it's like, oh, there's a 50-45 for Danny Sabatello, all 5 rounds. And it's like, say what now? Say what now?
Well, at least he didn't do it. At least this judge, Doug Crosby, right? At least
the judging genius, Doug Crosby, sir.
At least this was on a Bellator card and not a major UFC card that would really shine a spotlight on the bad judging.
Yeah, but
we'll get to that later.
With you, this of all the cards of all weekend, and I'm we don't need to. We're going to get to those ones in just a minute, but. This scorecard turned in by Doug Crosby, and the reason why I call him the judging genius is because that's how he labeled himself in a very infamous rant 12 years ago.
Good Lord.
He called himself the judging genius when he gave a 50-45 card to Frankie Edgar against BJ Penn in their very first fight.
Okay.
He basically forgave us for not being as knowledgeable and as great as he is at his craft. If you've never seen this, sir, I will share it with you. It is impressive.
So here's the thing about this, though, is this is probably why, a rant like that is probably why the commissions don't want judges and referees talking to media anymore.
Yes, it is. This is one of the primary reasons why we do not get officials talking.
So another reason to love Doug Crosby.
Yeah. Doug Crosby is
what a terrible card. like judging card.
50-45 is unforgivable in this one. And look, you know me, I have my judging podcast. We mentioned that earlier. I talk about this at length on that show, The Couch Side Judges, if you want to look at that. But in short, what I can tell you is just the simple fact that there's just not any effective offense happening from Danny Sabatello. He's wrestling. He's making it a wrestling match, but he's not doing anything with it. And my good buddy was there, my partner in crime on the podcast was at the fight, and he overheard from someone else. It sounded like they were hearing Mike Brown, who was his coach from ATT, kind of just begging him, throw some punches, and he wasn't doing it.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty clear win for Rafion Stotts. I wanted Sabatello to win, actually, but I just wanted because
a lot of people do not like Danny Sabatello.
I want chaos. That's what I want.
Oh,
here.
That's fair.
He's obviously.
I I think he is who he is, but I think he's just playing a heightened version of who he is.
Oh, I would not.
There's
I would
a
not doubt
character
that
there,
at all.
but it's not like, I don't think it's the same as like when Colby Covington is playing a character. I think Colby puts on a facade and then he doesn't want to live it outside there. I think Danny Sabatello is who he is, but he's just playing it a little louder.
You know what? I saw a video one time where like a guy saw like Colby Covington out in public, and he like somebody was recording it, and he came over and like he was like, "Hey man, like I'm really like going through a tough time. Do you have any like words of encouragement?" And Colby gave him like this amazing pep talk.
Sure.
And as Colby was walking away, he's like, "Hey man, like you seem like a really nice guy. Like you should show this side of yourself more often." And Colby just kind of was like, "Oh, thanks," and like walked away.
Sure.
Like it seems like
But that's the thing. Colby turns it on and off.
he does, but like that doesn't make it okay. That's the problem with that, right? Like,
Oh, I think it makes it worse, actually.
Yeah.
I would actually make the counter argument that the fact that he's playing this character all the time, or not all the time, is
whenever he's publicly
that's what makes
facing.
it's disingenuous, you know?
Mhm.
And he's trying to capitalize on a lot of let's say
Very
the uglier
negative
sides
things, yeah.
of fighting and of humanity and the current state of politics right now, and I don't like that. So
Yeah. But, you know, you highlighted something else here in the show notes about this Bellator card, and that is that Liz Carmouche kind of erased some doubts here.
yes, she did. So this was the rematch of a fight that happened earlier this year where Liz Carmouche got the win. She won her first major championship in the flyweight division, beating Juliana Velasquez in a fight that was, I think, largely agreed upon that the fight was stopped too early.
Yeah. So that
with
always takes
respect
the
to
wind out of your
referee,
sails.
Mike Beltran, who actually, by the way, is going through a health thing right now. He's recovering, but yeah, he's on the mend. What you should say, the referee. So I wish Mike Beltran well, by the way.
Well, that's good.
But having said that, I still think the fight was stopped early. That doesn't change my opinion on that actual matter. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. This fight was stopped too early. It looked like Velasquez was in the driver's seat for this fight, more or less, up until the point where it was actually stopped. That round wasn't going to her, but nonetheless, they do a rematch immediately because it just does, has that bad taste feel. And there's not really a contender out there where you could say, oh, they deserve the next shot at 125 pounds, the Bellator women's division. So get the rematch here. Liz Carmouche has to kind of defend her spot, make sure she erases doubts, right? And sure enough, she goes out there, and while the fight was mostly kind of boring for quite a while, it really wasn't any sort of heater for a while. And then all of a sudden, Liz Carmouche gets to mount, and she just goes to town, gets the finish that she's looking for. Looks like she probably jacked up Velasquez's arm because Velasquez tapped maybe a little too late to an arm bar.
Boy.
It is what it is. She had to
You
go right out.
you don't
She
wanna
didn't
do
stand
that.
for the hand raise because they needed to check her in the back.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's always a bad sign when they're not there for the hand raise, whether it's a KO or whether it's like a really bad submission or an injury. Like when they're not there for the hand raise and the reading of the winner, that is a bad sign.
I mean, she got out under her own power. I'm sure she'll be fine. It's her arm, it's not like it's her leg or something like that. She'll recover, I'm sure. But yeah, still unfortunate that it happened that way. But nonetheless, I mean, what the end result here is for Liz Carmouche is she is a legitimized champion in every way. We can forget what happened in that first fight. This is her belt. This is her time. She's having her moment, and good for her because she's been a true veteran of the sport for a long time and really gets her flowers here. So good for her.
Yeah, and it's good to see her get this because she came so close to that UFC title with her first fight in the UFC. And just couldn't pull it off. Like she had Ronda Rousey.
That's been the story of her career, though.
Yeah, she gets to the edge and then just doesn't get over the hump, right?
She did the same thing in her arrival on the scene. Do you remember in Strikeforce? She challenged who was the champion at the time, Marloes Coenen, one of the greatest women's fighters of, let's say, the pioneer generation, right?
Mhm.
She gets a challenge, like kind of a short notice, last minute kind of thing, if I recall. No one really knew who Liz Carmouche was. She only had like 3 or 4 fights. She goes in there and she almost beats Marloes Coenen. Now she gets finished. But this is kind of the story of her career. She kind of comes on. She's impressive. People not really expecting it, but she doesn't quite get the job done. So the fact that the first time she gets the championship, finally gets the belt, there's this cloud, this shroud. And unfortunately, it felt the right thing. And it wasn't her fault. She didn't stop the fight. She was doing her job. Just stopped. Here she gets a legitimate win. She can really bask in it. We're going to leave her the heck alone, and we're going to treat her like the true champion that she absolutely is. So that's why it's like, you know what? Good for her. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm happy for her.
And she seems like just a decent human being from everybody I've ever heard who's had interactions with her. And it's not just media. You hear people who like, she'll show up at a gym and she's just like a totally regular person. She won't even like tell you who she is. Like, if you figure it out, that's fine. But like, she's not going and be like, I'm Liz Carmouche. I'm the champion. She's just who she is.
I've actually heard that if you figure it out, she will choke you unconscious and then disappear while you're asleep.
That may not have been what I said, but I mean, be careful. She is, by the way, a Marine.
Yeah, I did know that
she
about
served
her.
her country too.
Yeah. She just like the choking unconscious is just basically her version of Batman's smoke bomb.
Yeah, something like that.
But there was one other big fight on this card before we move on, which was Patchy Mix versus Magomed Magomedov. Did you want to say anything about that? Because I completely missed this one.
So first off, Patchy Mix, I don't know how much you've seen of Patchy Mix's career, but he's a really fantastic grappler. He's really fun to watch, and he gets in there and, Magomed Magomedov is not really one for like tapping out or anything like that. So it kind of went that way.
Okay, so
but good.
So you're saying Patchy Mix Carmoushed Magomedov?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, it's
Magomedov.
He's stuck in a guillotine, and he's like, you know what? Maybe I just don't tap to this. That's
Magomedov figured out who Patchy Mix was, and Patchy Mix just wasn't going to allow that. He knew he had to pay tribute to Liz Carmouche's MO in the gyms.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, the one that we're inventing, correct?
Our headcanon here. But yeah,
but Patchy, I mean, he's a really terrific fighter. I really like this fight between him and Raufeon Stotts. It's a really good final, and I think as much as people were looking forward to Stotts and Sabatello, I think this one has the makings of a better fight.
Okay, a
more entertaining fight. So it's not going to have the heat. It's not going to have the juice. Probably won't be watched as heavily, but I think it's a better fight. So I actually recommend it more to people. But when Bellator comes around with their final, we'll certainly circle back.
Do we know when that is?
No, I don't think they're going to schedule that until they're ready to. It's probably, if I was to guess, they'd probably put in like April. I'm just ballparking.
Okay. Well, that is, I think that's a good look at the Bellator card and Michael C. Williams' weird, like breathy ring announcing. That's my takeaway.
He is absolutely an acquired taste. I think you either like him or you don't.
He drives me crazy every time I watch a Bellator card. It's just... It sounds like he's like trying to seduce me every time he says a fighter's last name. What's
impressive is he almost sounds like he almost sounds like the audio has been edited.
It does
in the way he talks. It's just like he'll kind of like cut himself off, and it's like it's I don't know. It's very strange.
He's like, Scott.
You have to hear it. I can't. I don't think I can emulate it.
I'm gonna try it. Scott Fontana.
I don't even see. I think of it. The Bellator cage is what we do. And
it does.
It's kind of more like that.
It sounds like, it sounds like that episode of South Park where Isaac Hayes was no longer voicing Chef, but they cut together little pieces of like to form sentences out of all of it.
I've never actually watched that.
But yeah, it's like basically
South Park, but not that.
It's completely disjointed and like it sounds like basically just cutting together like jarring parts of different sentences to form other sentences. It does sound like that. You're right.
It's not quite as pronounced as that, but yeah, there's a quality to it.
I was talking specifically about when he like announces the fighters' names, the way he kind of trails off. It's like it sounds like he's trying to seduce you. He's very breathy. He's very like
Raufeon Stotts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
there you go.
He sounds like he's building up, and then like the wind kind of just. Like it just exhales the last name instead of actually like putting a punch into it. Like say what you will about Bruce Buffer, but he puts a punch into names, right? Like he puts an exclamation point on names. Whereas I feel like it's not even a period when Michael C. Williams is announcing. It's just like almost like an ellipses.
You know what's weird about Bruce Buffer too is if you like when you think of Bruce Buffer, you always think of the that like hype you up kind of like an introduction thing, right? But when you go back and you watch, like, let's say a fight from 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that, from like kind of the height of the Spike era, especially, it's a very different call then from what it is now. And also there seemed to be kind of like levels to like how he would announce the names. Like the main event would definitely get announced different than like another main card fight or a prelim fight or something like that. Now, I think that still happens, but everything's been raised.
Yeah.
So it's like now the guy who's like opening the prelims sounds like the main events from 12 years ago. And then now he's like cranked it up to not 11, but more like 13.
Yes.
For the main event.
Well, it's funny because even like when I visited EA Vancouver, or I guess EA Canada, whatever it is called. At one point it was EA Canada. I think now
the
it's
studio
EA,
which works on the UFC games.
Yes. I was talking to them about that, and they were like, yeah, we have like different intensity levels from Bruce Buffer. So like if it's like a main event, he'll have this intensity. If it's a championship fight, he'll have this intensity. If it's just like a prelim card, or a prelim fight, he'll have this intensity. Now I feel like they had to tune that and like you said, like, yeah, bump all of it up one like
everything
notch.
changes. Yeah. It's just a wild thing. Cause I will go back and watch old fights. I don't know how many people will do that. And I do. And I'll listen to the introductions and I'm like, boy, Bruce just doesn't do it the same way anymore.
Well, also he had to stop jumping for a little bit because he used to jump when he would say it's time for like a main event. He had to stop that for a while because he actually injured his leg doing so. It was his knee, I believe. Yeah. And the doctor told him that if he kept doing that, he was not going to be able to walk in his later years. So he stopped doing that and he started just like kind of kicking his leg out when he would do it's time. Now I've noticed he started doing a little leap again. So like, I wonder if he got like the doctor he got the medical clearance that so
maybe he's just saying F it. I'm only, you only live once, right?
He went to one of those UFC doctors that will clear you regardless of anything. What, your shoulder's falling out? Yeah, good. Go for it. Fight against Aljamain Sterling. Who cares?
You do have 2 eyeballs, right?
Yeah, sure. Watch. I'll take the other one out so you can see it up close.
Oh, goodness.
But yeah, we'll use Bruce Buffer as our bridge to get over to the UFC here because Bellator, we talked about those 3 fights at the top of the card. I think that's all we really need to talk about. But
that's really all that came for the intents and purposes of our show. I think that's probably all we need to discuss.
UFC,
but UFC
282
had a lot more going on. Yeah.
Where do you want to start with this? You want to start with the main event?
Yeah, I think we got to.
So I will say this,
because if we go to the other one, then it's all judging is really what it comes down to. So, but I think, and judging will factor into this one because what we had was a split draw, and anytime you get a draw of any type, people will go crazy on the scoring because it's like,
I saw
right. But
I heard Jed Meshew, MMA fighting. He said the champion has a name and it's Yuri Prohashka. Which I like that a lot.
It was Ben Folks who was basically saying, this feels like kind of like karma. I'm paraphrasing here, but it felt like karma that maybe Yuri just keeps the belt or something. But
they
of course,
should,
within, I think we have to really. It's not just the fight we have to talk about. We have to talk about the whole state of the light heavyweight title now because So just to catch anyone up who maybe missed last week or missed the storylines or anything like that, Yuri Prohashka, of course, coming into the fight was the champion, gets hurt about 2.5 weeks earlier. They put together a new fight that doesn't involve him, of course, because he'll be out for roughly a year, or Glover Teixeira, his previous opponent. Neither one of them is involved in this fight. They go to the next fight on the card that was light heavyweight, which was, by all intents and purposes, a number 1 contenders fight. Feels like a reasonable way to crown a new champion, despite the fact that I feel like Glover Teixeira should have been put in there probably against Jan Blachowicz, right? Neither here nor there. It doesn't happen for one reason or another. So we get this fight, and Blachowicz goes in there, and I think he looks pretty damn good for 3 rounds. He's beating up the legs with the kicks. Did you watch the fight, by the way?
No.
Okay, so what's happening in the first 3 rounds is Jan Blachowicz is beating the heck out of Ankalaev's legs with his kicks here, just pounding him. I think round 1 is close, but like after that point, you're starting to say, okay, these kicks are having a massive effect to the point where in the 3rd round, you have Jan Blachowicz kicks early in the round. He kicks Ankalaev in the legs, and Ankalaev does the kind of my toes from Ninja Turtles. It's like the dude is visibly hurt by this stuff.
Somebody's got to throw him a pizza.
Yeah, I know, right? He definitely needed that. But here's the thing. At some point, someone clearly does throw him a pizza because round 4 and 5 are all Ankalaev to the point where we're talking about a 5th round 10-8 for Ankalaev. And that's where we get to this point where we actually have a draw because we have a fighter who won 3 rounds on most of the scorecards in Jan Blachowicz, but then we have in the latter half of the fight, we have the other guy winning both those rounds, but one of them, 2 judges gave a 10-8 for. The end result, without getting into the weeds, is that one guy had 48-47 for Blachowicz. One guy, judges, had 48-46 for Ankalaev, and somebody had 47-47, and that's a draw. And that was when I scored the fight, I had it 47-47.
Which, I didn't see a second of the fight, so
Sure.
I couldn't tell you what I think about it, but like, it screws everybody. The UFC wanted a new champion. Jan Blachowicz obviously wanted to win the championship. Ankalaev obviously wanted to win the championship. Nobody gets what they want now. Nobody even gets another chance.
Not true. Someone gets what they want. And it's Glover Teixeira, but against all odds, because within 10 minutes of the end of this fight, Dana White has come to the back. He's talking to the media and saying, yeah, we've got a new title fight. It's for next month. And it's Glover Teixeira against Jamal Hill, who was supposed to fight Anthony Smith in March.
Who, by the way, Anthony Smith is ranked higher than Jamal Hill. I'm not saying Jamal Hill's not a better fighter than Anthony Smith, but going off of like the rankings, Jamal Hill's number 7.
He is.
And I know he's an amazing fighter, and he's a guy that I think will, without this situation, would have challenged for a title sooner or later, similar to Ankalaev. Like, I think Ankalaev would have challenged for a title sooner or later if this whole situation with Yuri didn't happen. But it just seems like such a weird pull for that.
It's a very strange one, but here's the thing. I don't think you could justify picking Anthony Smith out for the title shot because he's coming off of a TKO loss to, who else? Magomed Ankalaev.
And he also got beat up pretty bad by Glover Teixeira when they fought.
On that one.
But I'm saying Glover Teixeira. When he fought Glover Teixeira, he lost pretty bad too.
Yes. Yeah.
Remember that's where
we're talking a couple years ago now.
That was when Glover was apologizing to him, and he's like, "It is what it is, man." And he's handing his teeth.
That was a brutal beating. But before the Ankalaev fight, he had won 3 in a row, so he had some momentum coming in. He was starting to kind of trend toward. He has a submission win over Ryan Spann, who obviously came off of that big victory in New York that I was at. It's not that he doesn't deserve to be there, but it's the fact that he is coming off of a loss to somebody who was just a draw in this fight. So I don't think it made as much sense. It makes more sense to go to Jamal Hill than Anthony Smith, as much as it's weird that they're doing what they're doing, which is essentially like, oh, we need a champion hell or high water. We're going to make a fight. If we have a draw again, we're going to do another one next month. We'll figure it out. Someone's going to wear this belt because the UFC doesn't really care so much about the best being crowned as long as someone's being crowned.
And obviously that's going to be the new main event of 283.
Because
we had Figueiredo versus Moreno. Do we know if Moreno's even fighting? Because he was training with James Krause. Like, is this going to happen?
I believe he is, from what I understand, he's moved on to Vegas and has found some training there. So I think that the fight will remain in place. It is what it is. There's also apparently some talk that James Krause is going to be selling off Glory MMA, his gym, and all his stakes in basically everything. It sounds like he's more or less getting out of everything, and for one reason or another, whether it's that this is his time, he needs to get money he can and get out and figure something else out, or is he doing it to at least to some degree for his fighters, for the people I'm sure he at least cared about as human beings and wanted to do well for and that kind of thing. So, for whatever reason, whatever his reasons are, if that's the case, it sounds like he's doing the right thing for them. But to kind of steer it back to this light heavyweight title picture, in particular, I do want to highlight Jamal Hill here because yes, he's number 7 in the UFC's rankings, not very high. Having said that, him against Glover Teixeira, I in no way look at this fight as, Glover Teixeira should win. I would, if you're telling me who to favorite, I would put the money down on Jamal Hill.
Okay.
I think the world of Jamal Hill's upside, I've always viewed him as a future champion, really going back to his first year in the UFC. Mm-hmm. Something special about this kid. He's not even a kid, he's 30.
He's very athletic and physically gifted, and he is an
amazing striker. He's a really fantastic striker. He had one setback against Paul Craig, but I think that was kind of a lesson hey, maybe don't play with too much fire. He had confidence in his ground game was kind of the thing, but he went down there with not just a grappling ace, but a submission ace, someone who's going to get your arm. And if he gets it, it's over. I mean, we're talking about somebody who the only loss on Ankalaev's record is from Paul Craig in a fight that Craig was going to lose until the last 10 seconds. He throws up a triangle and gets it. It was literally a miracle triangle. And he's got the submission record for light heavyweight too. So you can't play with that kind of fire. But he learned a lesson from that one, I would think. And since then, I mean, Jamal Hill really does look like the truth at light heavyweight. I feel like he's the type of fighter who could bring the balance that we've lacked at 205. So I'm as much as I think it's kind of stupid that they're doing this fight, I'm actually very excited for it in the sense that I've had my eye on Jamal Hill for a while, and I really think that something special could be coming out of this guy.
It's just so weird. They're like, all right, well, these are the two most worthy guys, Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev. Like, if Yuri Prochazka can't fight, these are the guys that deserve to have this title shot. And then it's like they get a draw, and it's like, instead of running it back, they go, oh, well, now neither of those guys are involved in the title fight.
Yeah, it is stupid. It's madness. But obviously they want a champion crowned tomorrow. Yesterday they wanted a champion crowned on Saturday, really, and legitimately. It's not even a joke. They actually wanted a champion crown, right? They weren't interested in waiting. They didn't want to push it off a month, and here we are. And I mean, let's face it, it's not going to be a draw again, right? Knock wood.
I hope it is. I want nothing more than for another draw.
That would be funny. That'd be really funny if like they just did a light heavyweight title fight every pay-per-view until Yuri was back.
we get to it, and it's like, all right, sure, Johnny Walker versus Khalil Roundtree, whatever.
That sounds like a title fight.
Like, we get to it, and eventually
just
it's
pin
like
a belt on somebody at some point.
Yeah, eventually they just award it. All right, fine, Yuri, you can keep the belt. Like, honestly, like, I think that Yuri might have put a spell on that belt. He's like,
but he put it out there. That was his. I mean, allegedly his choice.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're told, right? Like,
it's what he's saying. If it's true, he's towing the company line.
Yuri, he's seeming to think that he's not going to be out as long as like Dana White seems to indicate.
Right. But it did sound like he didn't want to hold up the division. So I mean, maybe he believes that. But yes, there's a discrepancy between the severity of this injury and how long it's going to keep him out. You have Dana selling it as like, oh, this is the worst shoulder injury that's happened in the history of humankind, and then there's Yuri that's like, well, maybe I won't be out that long.
Yeah, I'll see you guys in June.
We'll see. The truth probably lies in the middle. I'm sure we have a fighter who's very anxious to get back in, but then we also have a promoter who wants to make this sound like it's a true underdog story, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
The truth is somewhere in the middle, of course. But again, I like the new matchup. I think it's disappointing that we had to go about it this way, but it is what it is. What this does is I think it highlights something that a few people who know quite a bit about kind of the way regulation works with these championship belts. These championship belts, they're not sanctioned titles. It's not like boxing. It's a promotional, like, the people who know best, they describe it as essentially a prize for being the best fighter of that night.
Yeah,
and that's more or less
hasn't the UFC argued that in court?
The UFC has essentially agreed upon. Yeah, I mean, Dana has alluded to that as well. It's not the same thing. What I think we often view these titles as is it's a validation of the fact that this fighter is probably the best in the world at his weight class, because that's typically true. The UFC typically has the best fighter in their weight class.
Which makes sense that we would have a vacant light heavyweight, because there's a very good chance Vadim Nemkov is actually the best light heavyweight on the planet right now.
Right now, he probably is the healthiest, best light heavyweight on the planet.
So it's kind of fitting that there's a vacant title in the UFC in that very division, because they don't have the best fighter.
There's only one light heavyweight champion in the major organizations that you would look to as the potential number one, and it is Vadim Nemkov right now. Absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, it just highlights the fact that these belts are just, they're trinkets, right? It's just a promotional tool. We as the fight fans, the people who understand the sport, watch the sport, we can decide who's the best. And typically that aligns with the UFC belt. Right now, it's not.
That's what I like about the MMAfighting.com rankings that they do, because
me too.
Just because you're the champion doesn't mean you're number one. And sometimes, like, I would imagine that if you look at their rankings right now, I bet they would have Vadim Nemkov at least in the top two of light heavyweight at this point. I mean, maybe
I would have
they
to think that they're going to keep Yuri there for a while too. I think they have rules about the way they do things, and I think
it's 18 months
active for a while. Yeah, something like that. I don't imagine they would be dropping him out anytime soon, unless he was, again, maybe said like, I'm stepping away from the sport or something.
Yeah. But speaking of somebody stepping away from the sport for a little bit, Darren Till.
Yeah, Darren Till. I mean, this wasn't the most high-profile thing on there, but Darren Till is a name that, for whatever reason, people have attracted to. I think there's the UK MMA crowd is very rabid in their fan base. They really love their own guys, and I respect the heck out of it. I think it's wonderful that they do get behind their guys. including another one we'll talk about in a minute. But Darren Till is now lost, 5 of 6, I believe, is where we're at with Darren Till.
And that, he beat Kelvin Gastelum. And that's his only win since that controversial Wonder Boy decision that he had.
And that fight was not a good fight. I don't know how many people remember that. It was a split decision in New York. It was a couple months before the pandemic kind of hit. And it wasn't a stirring fight. He happened to win it. It was his first middleweight fight against Kelvin Gastelum, who, let's say Kelvin Gastelum is not necessarily super high in the middleweight rankings, but he is still somebody who is a very tough out, right? But all of his other fights, I mean, he hasn't won a fight in almost 5 years, 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And there's some good names on here. He lost to Robert Whittaker. That was a competitive fight.
That was a good fight. Yeah.
It was a good competitive fight. But at some point you just got to wonder, like, when are people going to catch on that this guy's just not as good as you think he is? He's kind of over promoted, Yeah.
The UFC got their entire promotional engine behind him after he knocked out Cowboy. And then it was like, all right, well, let's get him up to a title fight as fast as possible. And then we saw what Tyron Woodley did to him. And it was, that was just kind of like the downward slope at that point, right?
Right.
But it's, he said he's stepping away from the sport for a little bit.
Smart choice.
Which, he just got back to the sport this weekend. So it's been
a
while. He
doesn't have to retire, but, coming off a big injury and off another loss, another heartbreaking kind of loss here, because, as much as he did look competitive at times against Dricus du Plessis, it just, he's not getting the results. The results aren't there, and in the fight game, that's a really tough thing.
You know what? I'm going to draw a parallel between him and another fighter on this card, and Edmund Shabazian, because I think Darren Till needs a get-right fight, just like Edmund Shabazian got on this card.
Absolutely, but the difference between these two is Edmund Shabazian was very much a prospect. He finally got his chance against Derek Brunson, a man who also beat Darren Till, by the way. And he did not pass that test. He wasn't ready for it. He was still training with Glendale Fight Club, Edmund Terverdian, the famous Ronda Rousey coach, or infamous Ronda Rousey coach, I guess you could say.
Ronda Rousey was his manager.
Yeah, one of them, along with Edmund. But now he's training in Vegas. He's got a different crew. He's still very young. He's got a lot of potential still. I don't know that he's necessarily got the champion's upside, but I think he can hang with the best with a little bit more time and effort. Darren Till, yes, he's 29, but I think he's very much peaked. I mean, this is somebody who is now entering his 10th year of fighting. He's 29, but he's got some miles on him now. I just don't know that he's going to get any higher than he is.
Yeah.
But his real success was at welterweight, and I don't think he can make welterweight.
No. But I would like to see, like, if he does come back, I would love to see him get like a very easy fight. Not easy fight.
I think he deserves a step down, right?
A stylistic matchup.
Thing. Once you've reached that top point, that was kind of the point I was trying to make. I think I lost with Edmund Shabazian is he hadn't reached that level.
Yeah.
So it was easier to bring him down. With Darren Till, he's got name recognition. What can you do with him? Like,
it's hard once you reach.
Even Dricus du Plessis doesn't have a big name, but at least he's ranked.
Once you're listed as a former title contender, it is hard to take too far of a step back. Yeah. The performance that I keep hearing people talk about the most is Ilia Topuria. Because
it
sounds like he was the star of the night.
Dancing around like the one that everyone's been talking about. I mean, this is impressive for us.
Honestly, Paddy Pimblett. Fine, let's just rip the Band-Aid off here. Pimblett.
We probably should rip it off because there is a link between him and Ilia Topuria.
Yeah,
and I think what the link that I want to make, because I don't want to go crazy into the judging. Everyone has talked about it ad nauseum. I talked about it ad nauseum on my other pod.
Yeah.
What I really think we need to start talking about here is Paddy Pimblett. And this is not a disrespectful thing to Jared Gordon here, but Paddy Pimblett against Ilia Topuria, is a very different matchup between Pimblett and Gordon. I thought that was a well-made matchup between Pimblett and Gordon. A lot of people saw it as Pimblett's going to win. I thought it was very competitive. I didn't know who was going to win this one. But if you tell me Paddy Pimblett is going to fight his, on again, off again, pretty much on most of the time, rival outside of the cage, Ilia Topuria. Topuria, despite being 10 pounds lighter, typically, I think would just wreck the heck out of Paddy Pimblett.
I did see a little bit of the fight between Topuria and Bryce Mitchell, and Topuria was just lighting Bryce Mitchell up. Like, he's got some power.
He was. I will say, I was actually more impressed with Mitchell than I thought I'd be, because I was hearing everything secondhand while I was at this wedding that I was at over the weekend. My wife's cousin got married. Great time. But yeah, I was kind of hearing, oh man, he's just destroying Bryce Mitchell in here. I'm like, you know what? Bryce Mitchell's actually, he's hanging. He's just clearly not as good in the stand-up. But the real shocking thing, I think, for a lot of people was the fact that Bryce Mitchell loses by submission, and not just the fact that he loses by submission. The submission is locked in pretty quickly in this fight. You know, it's not that I think he tapped too quickly, but it happened so suddenly and shockingly, I think, for a lot of people, despite the fact that he was kind of getting lit up on the feet. But we think of Bryce Mitchell as like a grappling ace, like a submission wizard who can really control positions and really get to the right spots, right? Less submission wizard, more grappling ace, I think. But man, for someone who said he was willing to die in there, he quick tapped to that arm triangle choke.
Well,
so
as we've
maybe
seen,
he wasn't willing to die in there. I'm just kind of positing that Magomed Magomedov was willing to die in there, because he ain't tapping.
Well, I mean, as we have seen, some MMA fighters just love saying stupid shit.
How dare you imply that about a flat earther, sir?
Yeah, we don't need to say much more about that. But Ilia Topuria deserves all the flowers. It sounds like he was the most impressive fight of the main card, especially. But yeah, do you want to talk anything about Paddy Pimblett? Like, it sounds like a lot of people thought that Jared Gordon won this fight, and Paddy Pimblett maybe didn't have a super great performance, and somehow he came away with a win.
Well, I'll tell you, having watched the fight now, right? In short, I actually scored the fight for Paddy Pimblett.
Okay.
I will say that. I know this is very controversial. I've been told that I do crystal meth by random people on social media. I don't, actually. No one really knows that about me, but I actually don't do crystal meth. Never have.
Is it the blue kind from Walter White?
I've watched Breaking Bad. I can tell you that. That's about as close as my interaction with crystal meth goes. But I would say this. Round one, which 2 out of 3 judges gave to Paddy Pimblett, I think is harder to give than 30-27 for Jared Gordon. I'm much more amenable to someone saying you gave all 3 rounds to Jared Gordon, even as someone who scored the fight for Paddy, than I am to give Paddy the first round. The first round is not a great argument. I think rounds 2 and 3 are much closer than a lot of people would like to allow. There's a lot of emotion in this Paddy Pimblett situation. There's a lot of people who love Paddy. Most of them come from across the pond. But then there's a lot of people who really did not like what Paddy was doing with Ariel Helwani, as we kind of alluded to in the opening here. They don't like the attitude. A lot of them don't like the let's say the xenophobic phrases that tend to come out of Paddy Pimblett from time to time, such as calling Ilia Topuria a mongrel.
Yeah,
because he is Georgian, who's born in Germany and lives in Spain. I'm sorry. My family comes from a bunch of different places too. And here I am. We're all American in the United States. And granted, he's not from the United States, neither is Topuria. But a lot of people from the United States come from mixed backgrounds and all ended up in this place too. I don't see the problem with having that happen. And I did not like when Paddy brought that into it. It really it irked the heck out of me.
Yeah, he says, again, stupid shit.
Stupid shit. He hasn't quite caught up to him. I don't know that he had an off night. I think we just saw what Paddy Pimblett is, which is kind of just an okay, solid fighter. Like, I don't want to disrespect him, because I think that's also disrespecting Jared Gordon, who I think is a pretty solid fighter too. But I think he's on that level. I don't see championship upside from Paddy Pimblett. I never have. I'm not trying to be a hater. I just don't see it. I think he's a personality that people are really into, and that's it.
Yeah.
He'll hang for a while. He might even get close to a title fight, and who knows? Right opportunity comes along, maybe they'll just try and make it happen. But 155 pounds is not the place where that's typical.
I've seen some suggestion that his next fight should be Conor McGregor's welcome back fight.
I saw another suggestion saying it should be Francis Ngannou.
Honestly, though, if you put, I don't think this is like what they should do, But if the UFC put Conor McGregor and Paddy Pimblett at the headliner of the UFC, because they're going to the UK for a pay-per-view in 2023, if they put that fight at the top of it, that would be one of the hottest tickets in like the world, you know?
Conor would so badly smash him, and I'm not even talking about in the cage, in the lead up, in the build up to the fight, because Paddy basically just plays Conor's playbook over again.
Yeah.
It's like rerun. It's like a remake, and it's not going to work when the original comes around.
However, I think Conor's also past his prime, both in fighting and in on the microphone.
One would agree over here, but yeah, look. I'm not looking forward to more of the Paddy train kind of continuing on unless they can start giving him better matchups. I think a logical matchup, because I don't think you really should put. The UFC is not going to book Topuria against him. Topuria at this point is on the championship track. He's pretty close to a title shot in featherweight, despite the fact that it's very, blocked up right now. I think he could be 1 or 2 fights away, depending on how everything shakes out with Volkanovski, with some of the other contenders. I think someone suggested Topuria against Max Holloway. I forget who suggested that one. I like that idea. I think it's a very fascinating fight.
I mean, who else is Max going to fight, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's a fresh matchup. I think it's a tough matchup, and it would definitely test Topuria in a different way. I want to see what he would do against that level of striker, because there were some things that I didn't love about the Bryce Mitchell fight from Topuria in the striking department. I don't want to get too in the weeds. We're kind of trying to wrap up the show here. But
yeah.
Having said that, I think this would be a really excellent test for Topuria and for Holloway. Let's see where he's at too, coming off of obviously having lost now a third time to Volkanovski and having the door more or less shut on him unless Volkanovski leaves. But the matchup I want to see Paddy Pimblett next is Terrence McKinney.
Yes, that's another one that I've seen like kind of thrown around on social
T-Rex
media.
has been calling for this one for a long time. I don't think they can keep holding him off anymore of fighters of that level. And I think McKinney is, in terms of accomplishment, they're more or less in the same breath here. You know, we had McKinney lost a fight earlier this year to Drew Dober, who is a very well-regarded lightweight, but he was competitive in that fight. That was one of the rounds of the year.
Yeah.
It was a 1-round fight, but it was an amazing fight. I think Terrence McKinney has championship upside too. And that's why I think he'd probably win against Paddy Pimblett. But if Paddy beats him, I'm going to have to start shutting up and starting to buy in a little more. So that's why I like that matchup.
Yeah, that's a prove it fight for Paddy. And
I
then
think
also
it really would be.
It's a chance to elevate your name if you're Terrence McKinney. And like, you know, he's shown that he's got some goods, right? Like he's a very good fighter. But like he just doesn't have like that signature win that really makes him a star in like the eyes of like kind of like the casual to like mid-casual audience, right?
I think you could do. I don't know that the UFC even wants to do this. I have no idea how they want to book him, because at some point the kid gloves have to be off. I think they kind of were even to a degree with Jared Gordon, but now he's moved on from that level. If they're going to push him to the sky, they've got to push him higher. And I think Terrence McKinney against Paddy Pimblett as a like fight night headliner, I think that's a very attractive fight night headliner. You put that anywhere in England, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be fascinating.
We did have 10 finishes in a row on this card, which
everything got overshadowed because of the judging of the last 2 fights. But it was everybody was hyped for this through 10 fights. It was 10 finishes, amazing, and most of them were in the second or third round.
It was just it sounded like it was an action-packed fight night, and you know, fight night, UFC pay-per-view card, and
night of fights,
yes. And I'm bummed that I missed out on it, but. Is there anybody else you want to shout out? Because we should touch a little bit on and do at least our excitement scale for this upcoming fight night card.
Yeah, I think real quick, I would just to answer the question that we tried to ask after these pay-per-views was it worth the pay-per-view price? Despite the controversy, despite the unsatisfactory ending, especially to the title fight in which nobody won, I think this was definitely worth the price of admission. I think if you want stuff to be talking about, you have finishes, you have drama, you have controversy. This was 100% worth the price of admission. It really paid off.
All right. Well, I didn't see it, so I can't.
I understand. I'm just telling you. This ended up being one that, even though there was some trepidation on our end, especially your end, I thought it was great. But yeah, we got to look really quick here. Probably just a very short look here at the final UFC card of the year.
Yes.
UFC Vegas 66, Jared Cannonier against Sean Strickland. Key middleweight fight. Potential, maybe someone kind of stays in the picture where the other one maybe drops off a little bit. Rate this main event really quick. 5-star scale. Interest.
3.
3. I'll probably say 3 too. I kind of almost want to go lower, but I'm going to say 3.
But there are some stakes here, I guess.
There are absolutely stakes. I think the reason my interest is lower is because I see a lot of potential for this fight to be a total dud.
Yes.
Could also be fascinating. I would love to be wrong. I really would. But I'm very concerned about we're going to watch a 5-round fight that's not going to be particularly fascinating.
We're going to hear Sean Strickland say he's like going to murder somebody in the cage, and then he's going to stand there and not do anything.
That's a script we've seen before.
Yes.
But we also seen the script where he goes in there and says, I'm going to try and strike with one of the best strikers on the planet. And that's not going to work out.
Well, you heard what he said, right? Where he was like, I'd do the same thing again with Alex Pereira. And he was like, I just hold my right hand a little bit higher. It's like, that would just result in the same thing.
Sir, he didn't learn the right lesson.
No, he didn't. But what about the rest of this fight card?
The rest of this card, let's just each of us pick one fight we can't miss from this card. Give me one.
Jake Matthews versus Matt Semmelsberger.
Okay. I would give that's a popular one. I've heard that as well. But I am going to give you Drew Dober and Bobby Green. I think that one is tailor-made to be a fun fight.
That's very good as well.
Really good fight.
Also,
I think there's good fights on here.
Arman Sarukian.
Right? Is that the one you were going to say?
Yeah. Damir Ismagulov is who he's taking on. But Arman Sarukian.
Key lightweight fight.
Killer. So, there's some really good fights that have a lot of potential. There's no, household names on this card, but there are a lot of really, I think, decent matchups. I think Drew Dober versus Bobby Green, you're right to call that out. That's a really good matchup, I think.
So what would you say as far as your interest in the rest of this fight night card? What's your rating for that?
I'll do a 3.5.
3.5 is fair, but I'll tell you what, as much as I'm leaning lower on the main event, I'm leaning higher on the other one. So, if we did quarter stars, right, I would go probably 2.75 on the main event, and then I would go 3.75 on the rest of the card.
By the way, when you were bouncing back and forth between the main event and the card, you did this little shimmy that I wish that our listeners could have seen. But from one side to the other, we were like, well, I'm in the main event and then the rest of the card. I wish that we had some visual element just for that one moment. Just
imagine me doing a shimmy. Look at my picture on Twitter, and then just picture me shimmying.
But I think this is a fine. I miss the days when the UFC used to close out the year with a bang. Remember
they used to do that New Year's kind of episode, whether it was the final week of the year or the very first day of the year, more or less. Yeah, they don't really do that anymore.
I mean, that's when we got Nunes Rousey. That's the magnitude of event we used to get with the New Year's Eve.
Yeah, but I will say this: I like that. For 1 month, there will be no UFCs, and I get a little reprieve. There's going to be, we'll have a little MMA in there. We're going to talk about Bellator versus Ryzen for New Year's Eve.
Yeah,
we'll get to that one later. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And I think we're going to wrap this one up, sir. If you like this show, and I hope you did because we had so much going on, make sure you subscribe to Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you are listening to us. And while you are at it, would you kindly follow our social handles at Brian Pichet and at Scott_Fontana on Twitter and Instagram.
And then, of course, you can reach us in an official capacity at groundandpwnedpod@gmail.com or at groundandpwned on Twitter. Until next time, enjoy the fights, enjoy the games, and we will talk to you next week.